I think inflation is the crucial challenge over the next 1 to 2 years. As Raf said, it is coming down. There is a bit of a perception around that the inflation at the moment really is all a supply-driven thing. Petrol prices, rents, these sorts of things, energy. But it's actually, there's an underlying demand component to it as well. And that's what the central banks are trying to get on top of. It's often said that if there's just supply shocks, central banks should just look through them, let them naturally decline and come out of the numbers. And we are observing a lot of that. That's why headline inflation has come down quite quickly overseas, and it has also come down in Australia. But if there's this underlying demand component to it as well, that is actually something that central banks can do something about, and that's been part of it. I think there's another few things I'd like to highlight about the inflation challenge. The first is the productivity challenge, and I won't say a lot about that. I'll defer to Danielle, but we haven't had any, at least according to the numbers, we haven't had any productivity growth in Australia for a number of years. And although wage rises are around about 4% in a normal context of productivity growth aren't necessarily inconsistent with our inflation target, if we don't have any productivity growth, they're on the high side, and they're going to contribute to rises in costs. And we know that unit labour costs, as measured in the last few years, have been rising quite substantially, 6, 7, 8%, depending on how you might measure it. So that's not helpful for the inflation thing. The other point that Raf mentioned is about the geopolitical situation and the fragmentation. The Treasurer also mentioned this issue. Prior to the pandemic, we were living in a world of increasingly open trade. There was arguably a big deflationary impulse coming from China and Asia. In a world of fragmentation and conflicts and so on, we're going to see more potential for supply shocks. And although you want to look through supply shocks, if you keep getting them, there comes a point where everyone just expects inflation to remain high. And if inflation expectations adjust, then that's a problem. So that's sort of why you can't completely ignore supply shocks when thinking about this.